Welcome to another episode of The Man Who Woke Up the Buddha. This is Season 2, Episode 12. Zoey reveals the fifth noble truth. Previously, Marcus and Leila had a Zoom session with their Zen master friend Kizzy to try to figure out where or if Sid was coming from and where he might be going. In the process, Kizzy deconstructed and reconstructed assumptions about how artificial intelligence fits into the overall spiritual puzzle. When Leila arrived with Marcus for a visit the following Saturday afternoon, Sid stood up from his stool at the center island, retied the belt on the cushy robe he'd liberated from a hotel room in Las Vegas, and gave her a hug that dropped all pretense of being possessed by either the Buddha or cancer. "What am I?" Marcus asked, holding out his arms for a hug. Sid just pointed at the counter, where Di was putting out chopped liver, crackers, onion dip, pieces of quiche, and a pitcher of water. Leila took a deep breath as she realized that Sid's cancer had spread into the kitchen. There were too many plastic-wrapped plates of cookies and wine bottles with bows on them. Most sobering were the two leaning towers of flowers Sid had arranged in two 5-gallon buckets next to BH's doggy bed. He liked to flower them one by one. I'm dying not. I'm dying not. "They're trying to kill me," he said to Leila, as Bieca padded determinedly across the room and inserted herself between her master and the woman who'd been known to bring her fresh chicken parts from local free-range chickens slaughtered humanely at a farm near her house. Bieca didn't care where the chickens came from, what they ate, or how they were slaughtered, but she loved eating their wings, and their hearts were to die for. "They're in the car, Bieca," she said. So she nudged her towards the door and waited patiently as she went to the car, came back with a large plastic bag, took out a wing, and put it in her mouth. Mission accomplished, Bieca went over to Sid's stool and sat happily at his feet, chewing away. "I love that you're the Buddha," Leila said enthusiastically, as if he'd just been chosen for a part in a new play. "Not that I had a lot of choice in the matter," Sid answered with false modesty. "Neither did I," the Buddha said, with real modesty. Marcus hated trying to follow two conversations at once, let alone three, and he figured he could interrogate Leila later about things Sid might admit to her and not him. So he stood by the stove and listened to Di, for whom managing the logistics of Sid's medical care was just one of the many things she juggled with astonishing aplomb. Being with her was like sitting on the banks of a stream of consciousness and listening to water lap over the rocks. Stuff about when Courtney's new semester would begin, when Willie was coming back from soccer camp, Junior's passive-aggressive relationship with his soccer coach, Casper's latest escape from near death at his little kid's gymnastics school, and Zoey's refusal to do anything but read books all summer. All interwoven and conflated like a drug-addled Shakespearean tragedy with the fact that Sid was currently taking steroids to shrink any swelling, a Caesar medication that decreased, quote, abnormal excitement in the brain, which is the last thing Sid wanted to decrease, and Ambien, so he could sleep through most of it. She repeatedly emphasized to him that he really wasn't supposed to drink while taking this potent combination. Although, after very selective prompting, ChatGPT, in its codependent wisdom, acknowledged that it might be all right for him to drink in moderation, a term that was so flexible in Sid's inner dictionary, it was virtually meaningless. It's okay, I figured I'd have to do it all myself anyway," Marcus heard Sid say. "All what?" he butted in. Sid and Leila looked at him quizzically, as if they had no idea he was in the room, let alone had the temerity to barge into their conversation. Di just kept talking, although now it seemed to the oven, where a batch of chocolate chip cookies, based on Leila's mind-altering recipe, was close to perfection. Bieca hopped up, looking from Leila to Sid, wondering if the pause in conversation meant she was going to get another chicken wing. "Sid just told me how he's going to single-handedly jumpstart evolution," Leila explained enthusiastically. "Yep, rouse this slouching beast of endless suffering," Sid said dramatically, "and let it go softly into that good night. Sorry, I mixed a few metaphors there. Pharmaceutical hazard. Who is that poet?" He rubbed the top of his skull where the stitches were. "Poets, plural. Yeats and Dylan Thomas," Leila said. "And you're going to have to do this how?" Well, first these people are going to have to stop making each other wrong. Or right, for that matter, the Buddha thought. Well, Sid said, for starters, I figure the solution is to get people to realize that nobody's doing anything wrong or right. And how exactly are you going to do that? Leila asked, laughing. Love you, Sid. Love you too, sweetie. Well, I don't have a lot of time, so I thought maybe if I filled the entire cosmos with my unconditional love, acceptance, and compassion, the rest would take care of itself. But I realized it's more complicated. I know, the Buddha said. I tried that. Jesus gave it a shot, too. Diane handed Sid 5 pills, a cookie, and a glass of water from a carafe in front of him that he'd been steadfastly ignoring. Hydrate, big guy. Why would I drink this, especially before dinner? It will ruin my appetite. Doctor's orders. Can't I have chocolate milk instead? Sid asked. Seeing her shake her head, he made a face and drank the whole glass before taking a bite of cookie to get the taste out of his mouth. You know, my darling, Sid said, gazing fondly at Diane, cancer isn't water-soluble. He grinned with his self-satisfied way of grinning when he said something nonsensical that actually made a little sense. Trying again to insert himself into the conversation, Marcus asked, So what more can the Buddha, do, besides spreading unconditional love, acceptance, and compassion? I can't believe I'm saying you. Just stop using the word should and shouldn't, Diane suggested from out of nowhere. The recipe says I should use chervil. But if I use tarragon, you guys wouldn't notice the difference, she explained, as if she were a Buddhist Julia Child. Now she was chopping a large yellow onion instead of the shallots the recipe called for. Leila got up to help her, but Diane waved a knife at her threateningly before trying to cut through the illusion of the recipe. There's nothing wrong with shallots or chervil. She slammed the cookbook shut. I'll just wing it. Bieca looked up expectantly. The Buddha wasn't thinking about herbs and spices when he talked about acceptance, Sid said. Don't be so sure, the Buddha thought, laughing a little too loudly. Stop laughing, Sid said. I wasn't laughing, Leila said, looking over at Marcus. Me neither, Marcus said quizzically. Sid was looking kind of quizzical himself. They watched as he went into the liquor closet, poured 2 glasses of cognac, walked over to the microwave, and put his in. Want me to warm yours up too? He said, looking at Marcus. Before dinner? Marcus asked. Cognac is for after dinner. You're not going to be invited back if you keep talking that nonsense. Want to snort, Leila? Di turned around and glared at her. Oh, Sid, Leila sighed. I'll take that as a no. Diane's objection was more to the point. The instructions, she insisted, pulling off a piece of paper that was held by a magnet to the refrigerator. The ones with the word warnings in like 2,000-point type at the top say to avoid alcohol because very serious interactions can occur. It does kind of make sense, Sid, Leila said tentatively, carefully avoiding the word should. Traitor, Sid said with a fake scowl. Yeah, but they never say whether they're seriously good or seriously bad. Besides, Jay says they're just covering their asses. Who's Jay? Leila asked. My oncologist. He explained that the anti-seizure med makes my liver metabolize things faster. Oh, God, Marcus said, realizing the implications. Exactly, Sid smiled. I have to drink more, not less, to feel the effect. Except that you're taking Dilaudid and Ambien, Marcus pointed out. Sid ignored him, turned the microwave off. He then looked at Marcus sternly as he handed him his glass. Jake does 12 seconds on high. Nothing wrong with that, of course, but I prefer 22 on beverage. When I'm gone, I'm relying on you to remind him. Whatever, Marcus sighed in a tone of defeat. Sobering, I must say. Sid inhaled before taking a sip. Ah, smelled that. The heat releases the aroma. He closed his eyes and took another luxurious inhale. The Buddha's wife has espoused a great and noble truth, he said to everyone's surprise, including his. You mean Di? Leila asked. Yes, this time around, Sid agreed. So what was the truth? There's nothing right with chervil or wrong with tarragon, Sid said. Right, Marcus said. Acceptance. That's the Buddhist perspective in a nutshell. What do you know about my nuts? Sid objected. Suddenly, a voice piped up from the living room. They both kind of smell like licorice, but chervil is milder and has hints of parsley. 4 heads swiveled to the doorway. Zoey, Sid said sharply, trying not to smile. Have you been eavesdropping on your elders? The 12-year-old savant smiled sheepishly. Well, I wanted to make sure Grandma used the right herb. Thanks, Zoey, Di said. The recipe says chervil. And I suppose, Sid said, if you want to follow the recipe, you should. He said the word disparagingly. Use chervil. But there's no higher good to using chervil instead of tarragon, right, Zoey? Well, it'll taste better, Zoey pointed out. There was a pause while the grown-ups digested this unexpected pearl of wisdom. That sounds like a noble truth to me, Sid, Marcus pointed out. Me too, the Buddha laughed to himself. You can always count on Zoey. My darling granddaughter, Sid said in his most professorial tone, are you saying that following recipes is actually the fifth noble truth? Zoey looked at Marcus, who had stumped her with questions like this before. Uncle Marcus? She asked a little uncomfortably, as she always was when she didn't know an answer. Zoey, Leila said, looking for a ladder she could use to help her get off Sid's slippery spiritual roof. Could you find out who cooked the Buddha's food? Sure, Zoey said, trying not to show her relief as she disappeared back into the living room. Nothing like a new question to get you out of a jam. Now, where were we? Sid asked almost dreamily. Acceptance, Marcus said. Well, who am I to accept or not accept? Sid asked. Oh, no need to go down that road again, the Buddha thought. Leila looked at Sid curiously, struck by something in his voice. Confusion, almost anger. As she began speaking, he looked at her, as if hoping she could explain what he said. Well, Leila said, acceptance doesn't mean some things don't have a higher good. The Buddha sure thought there was a higher good to like love versus hate or peace versus war, Marcus agreed. Huh. Sid was clearly thinking it through. I wonder what he would say now. I thought you were him. Minor point. Sid took another sip. Okay, I wonder what I'd say now. What? Marcus and Leila asked, watching him expectantly. Good question, the Buddha thought, watching him expectantly. Recipe says rolling boil, not rapid, Di thought, watching a pot of water expectantly. Sujata, Zoey called from the other room. To be continued. By the way, I still have a few official Om caps to show your solidarity with, well, everything, as well as paperback copies of Season 1, so new subscribers can catch up. Both are free for new annual paid subscribers. Just go to davidblistein.substack.com. Thanks for listening.